Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on lookup functions in Excel. This is kind of a follow-on to the webinar that we ran a few weeks ago, I think it was now. We did a webinar on logical and lookup functions, but we didn't get a chance to take a look at the lookup functions part of that webinar. So I wanted to make sure that we did include that fairly soon after, because I know there were a lot of you that were particularly interested in things like VLOOKUP, HLOOKUP, and index match. So that's why I've decided to kind of slot this webinar in fairly quickly, and that's what we're going to look at today. Now, for those of you who are maybe new to our webinars, I'll briefly introduce myself. I know we've probably got a lot of our regulars on here. My name's Deb Ashby, and I am the IT trainer and subject matter expert at Excel with Business and Filtered. And it's really my job to keep all of our Microsoft content up to date. So I look after all of our Microsoft training courses, keep them up to date. I write new courses, write blogs, and also run webinars for our lovely customers like this one today. And I've been doing this for a very long time, so about 20, it's actually over 22 years now. I've just had a birthday, which isn't good. So about 24 years now in the IT industry. I need to update my slide a little bit, I think, and about 10 years or so in IT training. So hopefully that gives me enough experience to be running this webinar for you today. I'll let you be the judge of that. Now, as I said, we are going to focus on lookup functions in Excel today. So I don't like to assume that you know anything. So I'm going to start from the beginning and really just kind of explain to you, exactly what they are, how you use them, so that you understand the syntax and you can apply them in situations in your daily life. Because one thing I know that's quite difficult, and it's something that I find quite difficult as well, is that I can watch a training session, I can watch a trainer run through a particular function in Excel, but then when I'm faced with my own example in my daily working, it tends to throw me off a little bit. So I'm just going to try and give you a few tips and tricks which will help you sort of be able to adapt what I'm going to show you to the work that you do on a daily basis. Now, as usual, I'm going to answer the most popular question that I always have on these webinars. I'll answer that first, and that is related to the recording. Now, yes, the webinar is being recorded. We record them every single week. And yes, you will receive a copy of the recording and also the exercise file that I'm going to be using in the session today. Now, the recording goes out 24 hours after this webinar finishes. So this webinar is due to finish roughly 5:30 UK time. So that means you'll get it sort of in 24 hours from now. And it's an automated email. We don't send it out manually. I will give you my email address at the end, so that if you don't receive it for whatever reason, then you can just shoot me a quick email and I can forward it on to you. I will stress though that if you have spam, junk or clutter folders, please do check in those folders first for our email, because sometimes if you have moved some of our emails into your clutter folders or junk, then sometimes the system will automatically send all future emails from that address into your clutter folder. So please do check that before emailing us, and if you still don't have it, then let me know. All right, without further ado, let me just go through the agenda of what we're going to run through today. So we'll just start out by discussing the basics. What are lookup functions? And more importantly, why are they going to be useful to us? I'll then show you where you can find all of your lookup functions in Excel. And then we'll jump into a demo or a practice exercise where I'm going to show you how to look up information vertically and also how to look up information horizontally in a table of data. And I'm going to show you a couple of different ways that you can do that and really break it down so you have an understanding of what you're doing, as opposed to just learning the command that you have to type, because that's always going to serve you a little bit better. We'll then go through what the difference is between exact and approximate match. And this is something which is quite important, so we'll spend a little bit of time on that. And then we'll jump across to something a little bit different. We're going to take a look at index and match. And these are two separate functions, so I'll show you how they work individually on their own, and then I'll show you how you can really unleash the power of those two functions by combining them together. And we're also going to do some cool little things like creating a data validation list in the example that we're going to use. And I really like doing those. I think they're very useful, and hopefully you'll find a use for them as well. So how does that sound as an agenda, guys? If you want to type it into the chat panel, does it all look good? Thumbs up. Oh, thanks, Ken. He's wishing me a happy birthday. I know it was my birthday last week. I was the big 40. Not good, feeling very old. Wonderful. Okay, all right. So it looks like everybody is on board. Thank you. I'm getting lots of happy birthdays now. It's very, very kind of you. All right. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so let's discuss first of all, what are lookups and why are they useful? Well, lookups are designed to work with data that is organized into columns, and they basically find the value in one column and return the corresponding value from another column. Now that's all very well and good, all very nice to say, but it probably doesn't sink into your mind until you see an example of what I mean. So let's look at a very simple example. So here, and you can probably see where my music interests lie, I am a little bit of a rock and heavy metal fan. In fact, I am wearing one of my rock t-shirts today, just, you know, because I knew I was doing this presentation. And we have two tables in here. So the top table shows band, album, sales, and then we have a record label column, which currently is empty. And then underneath we have another table. Now in this example, the two tables happen to be on the same worksheet, but that bottom table might be on a completely different worksheet or in a completely different workbook. It doesn't matter. I've just got them on the same page, so it's easy for you to see. And what we have in that second table is we have album and record label. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to use the field or the column that is common to both of these tables in order to do this lookup. So what column is common to both of the tables? If you type it into the chat panel, what would I use for the lookup? Someone says the screen has disappeared. Can anybody see the screen still, the presentation? Yes? Okay, perfect. If someone's, I had a couple of people typing that they couldn't see the screen. You should be able to see a PowerPoint presentation at the moment. That's what you should be seeing with best-selling rock and heavy metal albums on it. You can? Wonderful. Excellent. Yes, album is the common field. A lot of you have got that answer right, so well done on that one. So album is the common field. So that's what I'm going to use as my lookup value, essentially. So I'm going to construct a VLOOKUP, which is going to say, look in the bottom table for the album name, and then return the record label. Okay, that is kind of what the foundation of a VLOOKUP is. You must find that information that's common between the two tables, and that's what you use as your lookup value. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense so far. As I said, we are going to do a live example. So let me jump out and into a spreadsheet. So for those of you who are saying, should you be able to see a spreadsheet? You should be able to see one now. So let's take a look, first of all, at doing a VLOOKUP exact match, because there are a couple of different ways that you can do this. I can see a couple of people blinking away in the chat panel. Someone's saying they've got no sound. Can I just double check to make sure that you can all hear me as well? I don't know whether it's just a couple of people. Yeah, okay, all right, fine, no worries. Okay, so what we have here, and this spreadsheet does look a little bit busy at the moment, we have our first table just here. Okay, so this is a table which contains product information. So you can see here I have the product name. So this is some kind of furniture store, I'm guessing, called No Obstacles. Furniture name, we have the size of that particular piece of furniture, the color, the price, how many are in stock, how many have been sold, the revenue generated, and then we have two columns, department and category, which are currently blank. And this is what we need to fill in. Okay, now I also have another table down here, and this contains product, department, and category. Okay, so if I'm going to do a lookup here, what is the common information between those two tables? If you want to type it into the chat panel, what are we going to use as our lookup value? Yes, you smart people, product. Yes, excellent. Product is common between these two tables. So that's what I'm going to use as my lookup value. Okay, now just above there, I've just kind of written out, so it's easier to see, the syntax of the VLOOKUP command. So we'll get to this in a moment. I just want to start by showing you where all of your lookup commands are stored in Excel. So as with everything, these are functions. So if you jump across to the formulas ribbon, you have your function library group just here, and this is where you have all of your functions. There are about 500 or so functions in Excel, and honestly most of us only use about 10 to 15 over the course of our lifetime, so a lot of them go wasted, but one that you definitely will use is VLOOKUP, and you'll find that under this group here. So it is, sorry, this group here, it is a lookup function, so you'll find it underneath lookup and reference. And if you scroll down, you'll see we've got right at the bottom, we have VLOOKUP. We also have match, which we're going to talk about later. We have, what else do we have in here? HLOOKUPs in there as well, and also index. And we're going to be looking at all of those, okay? So those are where you would find them in your function library. Alternatively, you could click on the little FX just here, where it says insert function, and that will allow you to search for the function that you're looking for. So if you know you want to do a VLOOKUP, you could type in VLOOKUP and click on go, and it will find the VLOOKUP command for you, and it will take you into a helpful little wizard. And I'm going to show you how to utilize both methods. So some people like to use this because it kind of guides you through a little bit when you're constructing your formula. Other people, and this is kind of how I am, prefer to just type it directly into the cell and do it that way. Either way is absolutely fine. I'm going to start out just by typing it in, and then the second time that we do it, we'll do it the other way so you can see which one you prefer. So I'm just going to type in equals, and I'm going to say VLOOKUP, and I'm going to open my bracket. Now you'll see underneath, I immediately get the arguments that this function requires. So you can see lookup value, table array, column index number, and range lookup. Okay, so what do all of these mean? Well, let's come out of here for a moment and scroll across because I've got them written out. So if we look here, the first one, lookup value. So this is what value do you want to use to find the other values. So your lookup value is that common piece of information, okay? The next argument is table array. So it's saying, where is the lookup table of the other values? So where do you want me to look for this lookup value? It's then saying, what is the column index number relative to the lookup table? And then it's asking me, do I want an exact match or an approximate match? Okay, so those are my arguments. And we're going to go through these so you see how simple they are. Now, the first thing I always like to do if I am doing VLOOKUPs is I like to name my ranges. So I can either put them in a table, I can just name the range, but I find it a little bit easier, particularly if I'm dealing with a large range of data. So I'm going to name this range of data down here. Okay, so I'm going to do a Control A to highlight it all. And I'm going to call this, I'm going to give it a name just by typing into the name box, which you'll find all the way over on the left-hand side. As I hover over it, you'll see very small, it says name box. And I'm going to call this product underscore list. And you must remember when you are naming ranges to press the enter key so that it sets. Okay, if you've never used named ranges before, I think I have discussed these on previous webinars. There's a whole host of good reasons why you should get into the habit of naming your ranges of data. They're really good for navigation. So if I was on a different spreadsheet, I could click the drop down, and if I click product list, it will jump me back to that particular range. So it's quite nice for navigation, enabling you to move around your worksheets quicker, but they're also really good for things like this, for things like functions. And you'll see why when we start to build our VLOOKUP. So let's go back to here. We're looking for the department, and we've already established that the common piece of information between the two tables is the product. Okay, that's going to be our lookup value. So I'm going to click in department, I'm going to type in equals VLOOKUP, open bracket. My first argument, the first argument, or the argument that Excel is looking for, is always highlighted in bold. So you always know where you're up to, okay? So we want the lookup value. So my lookup value is going to be the first product, A6, okay? Comma. It's then saying, okay, where do you want me to look for this product? So I want to look for the product in that table range that I've just created. So this is where I can use that table, that range name that I just added in. So if I press the F3 key on my keyboard, F3 will bring up any ranges that you've named. And you can see in there, it says product list. So I can just select it like so. Alternatively, if I just delete that out, if you hadn't named your range, you could go in and just select the cell references by clicking and dragging, but I prefer to name the range. If you've got a very large table, it's sort of a bit time consuming to click and drag down. So I prefer to just use ranges when I'm doing it, but it's entirely up to you. So F3, select my product list. And I can see that it's highlighted that information. If I do comma, it's asking me for the column index number. So if we walk through what we've done so far, I'm saying look up bamboo armchair in the table product list. And now it's asking me, okay, what column do you want me to return? So if I look in my table down here, I'm looking for the department. So I want it to pull back the department from this table. And the way that Excel does this is that it numbers all of the columns from left to right. So product is column 1, department is column 2, category is column 3. So we're going to type in 2 because we want to pull back the department. And then I'm going to do comma. And the final argument is, do I want it to do an approximate match or an exact match? So what am I looking up? I'm looking up bamboo armchair. Do I want it to exactly match the word bamboo armchair? Yes, I do. So I want to do an exact match, which means the argument on the end is false. Alternatively, if you know a little bit about Excel, you know that 0 represents false and 1 represents true in Excel. So alternatively, you could just put a 0 on the end there and it would work exactly the same. And I'm going to close my bracket. And that is your most basic VLOOKUP. So let's see if it's worked. Let's hit enter and it's pulled back furniture. Excellent. And if I scroll down, bamboo armchair is in the department furniture. And what I can now do is I can use my autofill handle and I can double click to copy that all the way down. All right, so that is a VLOOKUP in its most simple form. We're going to do another one in a moment because with this, it is a little bit of practice, but once you get it in your head, it's really, really easy to do. I'll just take a breath for a moment because I can see lots of things coming in on the chat panel. It is quite hard for me to look at chat while we're running through the examples. Let's have a look. Matthew's actually posed a great question. Would using named ranges make the spreadsheet resilient to adding columns at a later stage that plain coordinates wouldn't? That is a great question, Matthew. So yes, one of the reasons why, and you don't have to essentially name the range, you could also put this in a table. You could have formatted it as a table. And yes, if I was to add more information into here, if I've got it in a table, then it will automatically update and become part of that table. I wouldn't have to reselect the data. So if I added more stuff onto the bottom here, it would be better to put it into a table. Yes. All right. Let's do it again. Let's do it a slightly different way. I'm going to pull across. This time I'm going to use that function dialog box, which we saw at the start, because you might prefer to use that, which is absolutely fine. So let's click on the little insert function button. And as I said, you could search for it, but I can see here I'm on most recently used and it's showing me VLOOKUP at the top. So I can double click and it will take me into my helpful little function arguments box. So I'm doing exactly the same thing here, but I'm just doing it in a slightly different way. So again, it's asking me for the lookup value, which is the same. So I'm going to say bamboo armchair A6. Table array. So this is where I could go in and I could highlight the cell references, but because I named my range, if I press the F3 key, I can just select my range, product list. Now it's asking me for column index number. Which column index number do we want this time? Which column index number? Type it into the chat if you know. 3, yes, well done everyone. Some people have got 2, 1, no. Remember, when you're looking at column index number, you're counting, so 1, 2, 3, okay? Count from left to right. So we want to look up the category. So in this case, the column index number is 3, all right? And range lookup, are we doing an exact match or an approximate match? We're doing an exact match again, and that is the false argument, or 0 if you prefer, okay? And then when I click on OK, we have our category. And once again, I can just double click that autofill handle to copy that all the way down. All right, so that's 2 different ways of doing a very simple and basic VLOOKUP. Does that make sense to everybody so far? How are we doing? Have we fallen asleep, or is that perfectly clear? All good? Yeah? All right, we're going to do a few more, so don't worry. We're going to do a few different examples before we move on to index match. Wonderful. All right, let's move across to our next example. Now, this is something slightly different, and shall I zoom in a little bit? Make that a bit bigger. Okay, now what we're going to do here is we're going to do another VLOOKUP, but we're going to do an approximate match this time. So in our previous example, we were doing an exact match, and that is that false argument on the end where we were saying, I want you to exactly match the words bamboo armchair in this table. In this scenario, we want something slightly different, so we don't want to do an exact match. So let's look at the data we're going to be using first of all. So in this top table, I just have some income tax brackets. So we have low end, we have the high end, and we have a range description in here, and then the tax rate in here. And what I might want to do is, based on someone's annual salary in this little table below, I might want to return what that tax rate is based on their annual salary. Okay, so you can see here, I want it to look within a range of data. So it's not going to do an exact match. So here, £55,000 a year, if I look in my little table, I don't have exactly 55,000 in here. 55,000 falls somewhere between 35,350 and 85,648.99. Okay, so we're not doing an exact match. It's not looking for exactly 55,000. It's looking for where it falls. Okay, so this is the kind of scenario where you might use a VLOOKUP approximate match. So it's that true argument on the end. Everything else works exactly the same. Okay, so let's try it out. We're going to do equals VLOOKUP, open bracket. Oh, actually, first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to name my table. I don't think I've named it already. Let's do Control A. And I'm going to give my table a name. So I'm going to call it income underscore tax. When you are using these named ranges, again, you can't have any spaces. So you must have it all as one word, so income tax or one word, or have an underscore separating them. It doesn't like spaces at all. So and remember to press enter. Did that take? Yes, it did. Okay. All right, let's go. Equals VLOOKUP, open bracket. Now, what is our lookup value? What are we looking up? We're looking up the annual salary. So this is our lookup value. And it looks a bit weird because this is kind of in a table and I've named the table, which is why you're getting this kind of like strange brackets. That just means that we're in a table. So I'm going to do comma. And now it says table array. So again, this is where I can do F3 and I can select income tax as my table. Alternatively, you could highlight the range, entirely up to you, comma, column index number. Now, what do I want to return here? I'm looking for the marginal tax rate. So remember, we're counting from left to right. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That's what I want it to return, column 4, comma. Now, are we doing an approximate match or an exact? Remember, in this scenario, we're doing an approximate match, so our argument is true, or alternatively, you could put 1 on the end there and close the bracket, enter. Now, because I've got it in a table, it will automatically fill down the rest of them for me, okay? So this is in a little table, and you can see I didn't have to do it. I didn't have to auto-fill down. It did it automatically for me. So let's do a little visual check to make sure that this is correct. So 55,000 falls in here, which is 25%. 8,700 is here, 15%. 90,000 falls within here, and we have 28%. Okay, and hopefully if I was to change this, so if I move this down to 8,699, where it falls into the tax bracket below, when I hit enter, you should see that that updates. Okay, so that is really the only difference that we did, was adding that true argument on the end when we want it to match approximately as opposed to exactly. Okay, does that make sense to everybody so far? Yes, yes. No? Oh no! Okay, most people are saying yes. There's a couple of people, it's not clear how it looks up, someone has put. Let me run through it again, so just to explain it again, because I know it is a little bit confusing the first time that you see it. So let's do it again. So this table down here, okay, this is where I have annual salary. And I've just entered in here 55,000. These are the annual salaries of some people. I've just entered them in. They're not referring to different cells. I've just typed them into here, and I want to find out the tax rate from this table up here. Okay, and because these are not exactly listed, I don't have 55,000 listed in this table, I'm doing an approximate match because it falls somewhere in between in this range. Okay, so our VLOOKUP is equals VLOOKUP, open brackets. Our lookup value is the annual salary, okay, comma. Our table array, this is where we're looking for our value. So remember, I named my table, so I can press F3 and select my income tax table, which is just selecting that whole table, comma. And now it's asking me, okay, I'm going to look for 55,000 in this table. What column do you want me to return? So I want it to return the tax rate, and that is column 4. If we count from the left, 1, 2, 3, 4. And because we're not doing an exact match, I'm not saying find the word or the number 55,000 in here because it doesn't exist. We're looking in a range. I want it to look approximately. So we want true on the end, like so. Does that make it clearer for those of you who were a little bit? There's a lot of questions coming in. I can't answer the questions while we're in the middle of the webinar, unfortunately, so I'll try and get to them at the end. If not, I will give you my email address so you can come back to me with any questions that you have. Wonderful. As I said with these, they are practice, and I am going to send you this file that I'm using today so that you can have a little practice around with it. Okay, now there is one little caveat to this that I want to show you, one little weird thing with approximate match, which you might find, and I wouldn't advise using approximate match in this kind of example, but sometimes people try to and then wonder why it kind of doesn't really work that well. So I wanted to show you this as well. This is another table that we have. So we have just some order numbers, item cost, number of items, subtotal, and then we have the reduction rate and the adjusted total. And then I have a secondary table over here which shows me the reduction rate and the percentage. So for example, if the subtotal is 500, then they get 2% reduction rate. So what I want to do is I want to use the subtotal as my lookup value, and I want to look in this table and find the nearest. So technically, looking at this first one, 1,363, what is that nearest to? Well, it's nearest to 1,500. So I would expect it to return 4.5% when I do my VLOOKUP, but it doesn't, okay? So let me show you what it does, because this does sometimes throw people off a little bit. So if we do another VLOOKUP, so equals VLOOKUP, open bracket. Our lookup value, oh, actually, hang on, I always forget. Let's name our table just to make life easier. So Control A, I'm going to call this little table reduction rate. Enter. Okay, equals VLOOKUP, open bracket. So our lookup value this time, what am I looking up? I'm looking up the subtotal. That's what I want to look up, comma. Where do I want to look it up? I want to look it up in this reduction rate table. So again, I can press F3 to bring up my named ranges and select my table range, comma. It's asking me, what do you want me to return? So I want it to return the percentage of the reduction. So which column is that? Which column are we going to return in this example? If you want to type it into the chat panel. Yeah, very good. Column 2, exactly right. So I'm going to type in 2. Comma, and we're doing an approximate match because again, it doesn't, 1363 doesn't display exactly in this table. It lies somewhere in between these two. So I'm going to select true. And close my bracket. And you'll see what it comes back with is actually 3%, okay? Even though this is closer to 1500, and so we would think it brings back 4.5%. This is a little weird thing, and I really wanted to highlight it to you. And I've done a lot of research on this. And it's so difficult trying to find out information as to why it does it, because it seems to be like a really odd thing. But it seems to, what it does is it looks for the value in this table that is greater than the lookup value. So it would go to this one here, 1500, but then it returns the one before. It seems very backwards. So it will find 1500, but then it will return the one before for some reason. So don't be thrown off. This is probably not, you might want to use something like an index match in this kind of scenario instead, okay? But I just wanted to highlight that to you because I know a lot of people who do this and they're like, well, why is it returning the one before? Well, I can't tell you that exactly, despite my many hours of research on the internet. It's just kind of how it works in Excel, which doesn't seem particularly great, but I wanted to point that out to you in case you have come across that previously. All right, let's move on. Something slightly different, but still on the same vein, HLOOKUP. Does anybody know, and you can type this into the chat panel, the difference between VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP? Does anybody know the difference? Yes, very good, Lauren. You are straight in there. Horizontal lookup. Yes, so VLOOKUP stands for vertical, so we're looking vertically, and horizontal means we are looking the other way when we do our lookups. And this always makes me a bit confused when I first look at it, because I never really have my data running this way across the page, but if I did, I would be using an HLOOKUP. So this is basically the same information we've been using. So we have our product names. It's just we've got the headings running down the column as opposed to running across the top. So we've got our product name, size, color, price, all of our headings, and then we have our information running horizontally across the page. And the same with our little lookup table down here. So this is basically the same two examples as this one. So it's this data in these two tables, just running the other way across the page, okay? So this is where we would use an HLOOKUP because I want to look horizontally as opposed to vertically, okay? So we're still doing the same thing. We're still gonna look up the department and the category in this table down here, but we use HLOOKUP instead. So this is good practice. Let's just do it again. So I'm gonna start out as always, naming my range. So I'm gonna do Control A, and I'm going to call this products 2 and hit enter. And we're going to look up the department. So this time we're going to do equals HLOOKUP, open bracket. So we're going to do the same thing. So it's saying, what is the lookup value? The lookup value is the same. It's bamboo armchair, comma. Where am I looking for that bamboo armchair? Well, we're looking for it in this table down here. So you can press F3 or select the range. I'm going to select my products to table, comma. Now this is slightly different. Instead of saying column index number, it's asking me for a row index number instead. And that's because it's running the opposite way. We're looking for rows as opposed to columns. So I'm looking for department here. So which row is that, everyone? 2, exactly right. We've got some 14 and 15s coming in there. It's actually row 2 that we're looking for, okay? Because we're looking for the department in this table. So 1, 2, 3, okay? Number 2. Comma. And again, we're doing an exact match this time. So our argument on the end is false. And close the bracket. And there we go. And I can then copy that across if I need to. Oops, went a bit too far there, a bit overexcited. So let's do it one more time so you kind of get the hang of this, okay? So equals H lookup, open bracket, lookup value, bamboo armchair, comma, table array. Where are we looking for it? I'm going to do F3 and select my range, comma, what's the row index number this time? Yes, great, 3, perfect, yes, 3, because we're looking for the category this time. So 3, and then false or 0 on the end because we're doing an exact match. Okay, and then you can drag across. So pretty much exactly the same, just running the opposite way across the table. So you've seen quite a few examples there. We've done VLOOKUP, exact match. We've done a couple of examples of approximate match and also an H lookup. As I said with these, they are confusing to get your head around first of all. They really do require practice, but hopefully that will give you a foundation for those, and you can go back and you can review this webinar, practice on some of your own examples, and you'll find that once you get it sort of clear in your head exactly what you're doing, that they'll come as second nature to you. They're one of my favorite things to do. I really enjoy doing them now, but I didn't used to. I used to hate them because I used to get things around the wrong way, didn't fully understand what I was doing, and that is the key here, is really understanding what you're doing, what you're looking for, and then you'll find that they do tend to flow fairly easy. So how does that look to everybody so far? Everyone, are we asleep? What's going on? Speak to me, people. Yep, lovely. All right. I tell you, I think I'm sitting in the world's hottest room today. It's like a sauna in here. It's freezing cold outside, but this room is like an absolute sauna, and there's no air conditioning. So I'm kind of fanning myself with my notes. So I hope wherever you are is a little bit cooler, because I'm quite looking forward to leaving this room. All right. Final thing we're going to look at is something which people are always really interested in, and that is index and match. Now, index and match are also lookup functions, essentially. Okay, they're part of that whole lookup family. And again, if you go onto the formulas ribbon and look in your lookup and reference, you'll find that you have index and you also have match in there as well. So they are functions in their own right, but really where they're when they're at their most powerful is when you use them in combination together. So you might have heard people say index match as if it's all one function. It's not. They are two separate, but very often they are combined together to really kind of make your lookups powerful. Now, you might be wondering, how does this differ from VLOOKUPs that we've been doing? There are some drawbacks to VLOOKUPs. If we go back to our original example, when you do a VLOOKUP, the lookup value that you're looking for must be to the left of what you're looking for. So what I mean by that is we were looking for the product. So in this table down here, when we did our VLOOKUP, we were saying search for bamboo armchair or whatever it is in this table down here. And the product was in the leftmost column, in that first column. And I wanted it to return items that were to the right of it. So we were returning the department and the category. okay? VLOOKUP can only look from left to right. If I was doing it, for example, say I was looking up, say I wanted to use the category to look up the product, I couldn't use VLOOKUP because it would have to search this way through the table, and VLOOKUP does not search to the left. It can only go to the right, okay? So that is something to bear in mind. Index and match can search anywhere in a table. So I can search for anything, anywhere in this table. It doesn't have to be to the right of the lookup value, okay? That is the difference between VLOOKUP and index match. And I'll show you how they both work. So we'll look at them separately first of all. So I'll show you what index does, and then I'll show you what match does, and then I'll show you how you can combine them to make them really, really powerful when you're doing lookups. So what we have here, again, is a little table. And this is, I think I took this from a development website. So it was a games developer. So they develop apps on their website. So we have a division. We have the app names, some very odd app names, the revenue those apps have generated, and the profit that those apps have generated. And then what I have over here is I have, it says select app. And what I want is to be able to create a little drop-down list where I can select an app from the list, and it's going to return for me the division that that app belongs to from this table, the profit, and the, oh, that one's supposed to say revenue. Let me just change that. And the revenue as well. Okay, so that's what I'm aiming for. And there's a few little techniques which I'm going to show you, different things. Now, the first thing is I want to create a little drop-down list. And this is useful, not just for lookups, but for just generally in working in Excel. And it's called data validation. This is how you create little drop-down lists in Excel if you want people to select things. I really love this little feature. It's really, really nice. So what I want to do is, currently it says Misty Wash, which is one of the apps in our little table here. But I want to be able to have a little drop-down arrow so I can select any of these apps from a big list, okay? So I'm going to select cell H5, and I'm going to go to Data. And, oh, I can never remember where it is. It's never on the tab I think it is. Where are you? I always tend to go blind. I'm looking for data validation. Can someone... Where is it? I'm completely lost where it is. I'm sure it's on the data tab. Am I just being completely blind? I am being blind. There it is in the middle there. You know, sometimes when you look at your screen and you're just like, I can't see what's going on, even though it's right in front of me. All right, data validation. And we can set some settings. So I'm going to say allow, and I want to create a list. Okay, so it's saying to me, okay, you want to create a list. Where is your list source? So I'm just going to click my up arrow to get that out of the way. And the list I want is of all of the apps. So I'm just going to highlight them all. And if I click OK, what then happens is I get this little drop-down arrow, and I now have a nice little list, and I can switch between the different apps. So essentially what I'm going to be doing here is using my little drop-down is I want to be able to select an app from the list and have it pull back from this table the division it belongs to, and the profit, and also the revenue if I want it there as well. All right, so that's what we're going to do. Now, let's take a look at the index function on its own first. All right, so I'm going to type in equals index, okay, and I'm going to open my bracket. Now, what index does, what you need to think of in your mind is when you do an index, you need to think, okay, what am I looking for here? So I want it to pull back the division. Okay, so in my table, I have this division column here. So I wanted to index the entire division. Okay, comma, and now it's saying to me, okay, row number. All right, so I'm looking for the SLEOPS app. So what row number is that in? Now I have a small amount of data, so I can just count down. I can say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so 7 and close. Okay, and it brings back the division of productivity for SLEOPS. So that's kind of what index does, which is all well and good, but I kind of had to count down the rows there. I had to sort of say, okay, it's number 7. Now, if I've got a small list, that's absolutely fine. However, if I had a list that had thousands and thousands of rows, I'm not going to want to be sitting there counting down how many rows before it will pull back my result. I want to automate this little row part, and that is where the match command comes in. Okay, now let's just look at match on its own so you can see what that does, and then we'll put them together. So equals match, open brackets. So what's my lookup value? So I want to say, I want you to look up whatever's in cell H5, in this case it's SLEOPS, comma, and I want you to look for it in the division. I want you to look for it in the apps, just here, comma, and then I want you to do an exact match. And it pulls back what row that app is in. So it's telling me row 7. So the match command essentially is doing the automation part of the index. Okay, so we can combine them together in order to get the result that we want. So let's put them together, and I'll do this a couple of times because it is quite a difficult concept. So we're going to combine the two. We're going to say equals index, open bracket. The first thing with an index, you want to think to yourself, what am I looking up? I'm looking up the division. Okay, so I want to highlight everything in that division column, comma. Now this is where we would type in the row number. Now we're going to use the match command to automate the lookup of the row. So I'm going to type in match, open bracket. We're going to say match the app in H5, comma, and we want you to look for the app in the apps list, comma, and we want to do an exact match. So that's a 0 on the end, and close the bracket. Oh, and you see there, I'm actually quite glad I did that. I haven't put enough parentheses on the end. I always forget that, but the useful thing with Excel is it will tell you if you forget to put in the correct amount of parentheses. So remember, when you're doing your formulas, you always want to make sure you close off as many parentheses as you've opened. So I've opened 1, 2, and I only closed off 1, which is why I'm getting this message. So I'm going to allow Excel to correct that for me by saying yes. And there we go. It gives me the division that that particular app is in. And if I then select a different app, it's going to change. Okay, so that is how you can combine them both together. Let's do it again for profit so you get the idea. Equals index, open bracket. So we're looking for the profit. Okay, so we want to highlight the profit column, comma. We're going to do a match. Our lookup value is whatever is in H5, comma. And where does that lookup value belong? It's in the apps list, comma, and we're doing an exact match for that app name. And 2 parentheses to close off our formula, like so. Okay, so let's do a double check. Accord, where are we? Accord, 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 accord. There we go. And I can see the division is utility and the profit is 800. Okay, should we do it one more time? Again, this is another one that is repetition. I would suggest practicing on examples of your own and really kind of giving it a go, because again, once you get it in your head, it's quite easy, but I understand you're probably looking at this now thinking, oh my God, this makes no sense. I was exactly the same, but it does get easier. So index, open bracket. What is our first up? What array are we looking for? What are we going to do here? Anyone type into chat? What are we looking for? Yes, very good. Revenue, excellent. So we're looking for the revenue. So we're going to highlight that revenue column, comma, match, open bracket. We're going to match whatever is in cell H5, comma, and we're looking for that app in the apps list, comma, and we're doing an exact match. 2 parentheses to close, like so. All right, let's do a visual check again. So accord, yes, 17760, and just to make sure, let's change it to something else. So we've got WenCal, so productivity is the division, and we have 14432 and 240. All right. I know that's quite a lot to take in all in one go. There is another example which I'm going to show you it. And let me just make sure I get my notes out because I never get this right either. I'm going to show you it, but I realise that for some of you, this might be a little bit of like a mind blown moment. So don't worry too much if if you think, oh my goodness, this is just too much for me to take in. I would practice just the basic index and match first of all, and then once you've got that, you can maybe move it on to a little bit more advanced. So I'm just going to show you another quick little example just because why not? We've got 10 minutes left. I'm going to show you an example of where we have, I'm just going to delete these out. I'm going to make this here, where it says revenue, I'm going to make that a little drop down so I can toggle between profit and revenue in one box essentially. So instead of having it split out, I want to have it on a toggle. So I'm going to use the data validation utility again. If you remember when we created this list, we used data validation, we highlighted what we wanted in our list, and we got our little drop down. So I'm going to do the same. We're going to go to data validation. I'm going to select list and my source. So what do I want in the list? I basically just want revenue and profit. So I'm just going to highlight those two and click on OK. So now I have a little drop down which will allow me to toggle between the two. Okay. So in order to do this, this makes it a little bit more difficult because what's in this box changes, okay, depending on which one you've selected, which is what makes the index match a little bit more tricky, and it's a bit longer, but I'm going to show you it very, very quickly. I'm not going to go too much into it, but we're going to start with index, open bracket. Now, what are we looking for? Now, it says profit at the moment, but it could be revenue. Depending on what I've selected, it might be profit or it might be revenue. So my index is going to be both of these columns. It's like your little map. Where are you looking for it? So whatever you're toggling between, you want to highlight all of them. So it could be revenue or it could be profit. Comma, match. Oops. Open bracket. Our lookup value is the same, so H5, comma, and we're still looking for that in the apps. So this is pretty much the same as it was before, comma, and we're doing an exact match. I'm going to close off the bracket, but this is where we have to add in something extra, and that is really to account for this little toggle that we've added. So we're going to do a comma and another match on the end. Open bracket. And this time we're going to say G7. So whatever's in here, comma, needs to match with these column headings. So that's how it knows which one to pull through depending on what you've selected. Okay, comma, and we're doing an exact match. And I'm going to close off my bracket. So how many have I opened? 1, 2 I've opened. So 2, like so. All right, so let's just double check that. So WenCal, we've got here, profit is 240, that's right. So what if I change this to revenue? 4432. And if I change this to a different app, it should update. Okay, so that is a slightly more complex index match that you can do. As I said, if you're just learning this, I understand that that's probably gonna like be too much for you at this stage, but I just like to throw in a little more advanced thing in there for those of you who are a bit more used to doing these, and it's something that you can go back and you can review and get your head around a little bit more. All right, that is pretty much everything I wanted to show you today, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. I'm going to open it up to questions. As usual, there's so many all the time. Let me go to the Q&A box and see. Let's see. Oh, there's just people saying happy birthday. Thank you. Someone's put our named range is dynamic, i.e. if I add more data to a named range, does the range grow to accommodate? No, they're not dynamic. You would need to update the named range. A table is dynamic. So again, that might be actually a better way for me to do this in the future. So that's good that you've pointed that out. If you're doing VLOOKUPs, oh, doesn't seem to want me to switch to my VLOOKUP spreadsheet. Hang on. Oh, that's weird. My Excel seems to have hung. I don't know why it's done that. But yes, to answer your question, tables are dynamic, named ranges are not. So you could put your lookup table in a table as opposed to a named range, yes. Let's have a look. Someone's put, how do I access earlier training videos? I will give you that link in a moment, Salman. If you have a very long column, is there a better way to select the entire column so not having to scroll down? Yeah, if you want to select an entire column in Excel, if you do Control Shift down arrow, that will select the entire column so you don't have to scroll down. Let's have a look. Someone's put, why is the @ sign in the VLOOKUP? That was because it was in a table. So that's just the syntax of Excel. Let's have a look. If you had 1,000 rows in the first column, how would you select the range? I think that's the same kind of thing. So you could do Control Shift down if there's a lot of rows. And then Odessa says, happy birthday. Thank you very much. That's everything that was in the question panel. I'm sure there's loads more in chat. Daniel's just put, okay, my brain just exploded. I'm sorry, Daniel, I'm sorry. I like to make your brain explode, you know, on a Wednesday afternoon. All right, okay. There's a lot of thank yous coming in here. All right, let me just pull up my final slide. As I said, I'm going to give you my email address. Sometimes it's a bit easier to answer questions because they scroll up so quickly for me in here, and there's so many. Oh, do I have my, no, this is an old slide deck. Apologies for that. Let me just very quickly update this because I am using an old slide deck here. So if you want to email me, I'm Deborah at, Deborah.ashby@filtered.com. It would help if I could spell today. Oh my goodness, filtered.com. Okay, so that's me. If you have any questions or if you don't get the recording, and remember, it goes out in 24 hours. I always get a couple of hours after we finish the webinar, people emailing me saying I haven't received the file. It doesn't go out for 24 hours, okay? So if it gets to this time tomorrow and you still don't have it, then yes, let me know and I can forward it on to you. All right, and to answer the question about the previous webinars, they are available on our website. As I said, we are still in the process of uploading them to YouTube. It is very slow because we're doing lots of new introductions for them, but they are on our website. So again, if I jump you across to, if we go to Excel with Business Live classes, so this is the URL just here. Okay, so Excel with Business Live classes, and what I'll do is I'll just copy and paste that into the chat panel for you so you can click on that. And there you go, like so. All right, so that is where you can catch up on all of our old webinars, and they are listed down there by category. Okay. All right, guys, we're just coming. I can't believe I finished on time again. This is the second week in a row I finished on time, feeling very proud of myself. I think the key is to concentrate on less. I sometimes tries to squeeze too much in. So thank you so much, guys. I cannot wait to get out of this room. But I will hopefully speak to you all very soon, and I will see you on the next webinar. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.